In March of 2018, John McLarnon, author of Ruling Suburbia, sat down with Delaware County Political News to discuss his book and the history of the Delaware County local government. He describes the rule of John McClure, the chairman of the local Republican Party. He was the most powerful and influential man in 20th century Delaware County government. John McClure is considered to be the founder of one of the strongest suburban political machines in the country. And Ruling Suburbia represents 2 years of author John McLarnon's research about how John McClure controlled Delaware County. I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to Delaware County Political News. This is Larry DeMarco, your host. If you haven't subscribed yet, it's time. Click the red button and the bell beside it and enjoy. In chapter 6 of your book, you really pinpointed how he did it and the structure of the machine. Talk about that.
He created this thing called the Delaware County Republican Board of Supervisors, commonly known as the War Board, although he hated that name. But it was really John McClure calling the shots. He did the same thing with policy and slating people for election. He knew who he had wanted to run for whatever office. But on paper, or as far as the public was concerned, the Board of Supervisors, the War Board, would get together and slate the candidates. There was an illusion of democracy. There was an illusion of local control, which meant that they thought they had control over their own destiny.
Discuss the control and responsibilities that he did allow these people to have.
Well, their number one responsibility was get out the vote. When all else fails, elections were the single most important thing. They organized the campaigns in their own areas, and McClure would adjust patronage, the awarding of patronage jobs, and the number of jobs each person had to dispense to his particular area, with the approval of McClure, because McClure approved every single patronage appointment.
Professor, you talked about these patronage jobs. Yeah. How would someone get a job in the courthouse? Get it based upon merit?
No, there's no merit involved.
What? You mean it doesn't go to the best candidate? Explain that, please, Professor.
Merit, if by merit you mean your loyalty to the machine, your willingness to get out night after night in the months leading up to an election and knock on doors and deliver literature and maybe work the polls, if that's merit, yes. Accounting firm was more than an accounting firm. They did an audit of the courthouse in this early 60s during the time of this rebellion. And they found mechanics who couldn't fix cars. They found clerk typists who couldn't take shorthand, couldn't type. They found all kinds of people holding jobs at the courthouse for which they were singularly unqualified.
What type of candidate was McClure attracted by, and the GOP generally?
A candidate who would follow orders, a candidate who appealed to the public, because it was important for him to maintain these illusions, and people aren't going to vote for somebody that they flat out don't like. But a candidate who's perhaps not the smartest person in the world, not, as my brother would say, a rocket surgeon, but more than anything else, somebody who can kind of understand whatever issues they're dealing with, but more than that, can sit down and be given his marching orders and be expected to follow those orders. And McClure never cared. One of the secrets to his success is the jobs in the county. It was the elected jobs and the appointed jobs in the county. That was his bread and butter.
Now why? What benefit did he get from having so many income earners within that courthouse?
Patronage and macing, and one is just the other side of the coin from the other.
What is macing? Tell us about that.
Macing, you won't find it in the dictionary under this, but the way I define it to my students is it's requiring voluntary contributions to the party, right. Essentially.
Sure.
Because in Pennsylvania, it's illegal to require somebody to contribute to the party as a
condition of employment.
A condition of employment. And it was very clearly laid out exactly how much you were required to voluntarily contribute based on what your salary was.
And if you refused?
Your job did not continue. Nobody dared not contribute. And this went right up to judges. Now, a judge in Pennsylvania is supposed to be, I guess anywhere, is supposed to be apolitical. Once you go on the bench, you're not political anymore. But it was understood that in order to be slated on the Republican ticket for the bench, and being slated on the Republican ticket was tantamount to election, you had to pay 10% of 10 years, or 1% of 10 years' salary. So that's quite a chunk of money.
What is the Republican Party's money based upon?
Tax money. It's public employees.
From this thing called?
This thing called macing.
Okay.
McClure's not the only one that did it, but he perfected the system. And there were times, I can think of at least 2 times, where the Chester Times, the forerunner, or what is now the Delaware County Daily Times, for some reason got mad at McClure. And they actually published the macing rates, what each person, based on their job rating, was supposed to pay. I can't speak for the people in charge now.
Because you don't know. You're not contrasting. You just said you don't know either way.
Right.
So how did someone actually get a job, and how was the committee person relevant?
Well, if I've just moved into Delaware County. I don't know anything about the politics. I'm politically interested, aware. The first thing that would happen is somebody would knock on my door, and it would be the local committee man or the local precinct leader, and he'd tell them, welcome to the county. By the way, we're all Republicans out here. You do understand that, right? And right then and there, the message is very clear. If you need something done, if you need a street light put in, if you're having problems with anything, it's best if you're a Republican. From that point, if you want to get involved, you can volunteer. You're invited to volunteer to do work, particularly at election time, and you work your way up. And eventually you might get nominated if you show some brain, some initiative, but more than anything else, a willingness to work long hours, particularly in election season, and an absolute total loyalty to the machine. You might find yourself in 5 or 10 years running for a row office in the courthouse, or running for some other job for which you'll get paid. If you're a lawyer, you might be appointed solicitor, because every one of these towns had solicitors, at least when McClure was in power. And if you continue right up the ladder till you eventually become one of the select on the board of supervisors, on the war board.
John, you actually spent a chapter on Chester and how the GOP kept control of Chester, minority jurisdiction, for years, on a place that typically would be Democratic. How did he do that? Be specific.
Things like access to the county nursing home. That used to be, I don't know how it is now, it used to be when McClure was alive, you didn't get into that nursing home without sponsorship from your local committee man. And if you were Republican, you could pretty much be assured that if you would get into the nursing home. Before the New Deal, before all the social welfare programs at the federal level, everything was local. Everything that you needed, you had to get at the local level. If your kid got in trouble with the cops, and you could call your committee man, and he might get him out if it wasn't a lot of trouble. If you had a very promising child who needed more to get ahead than what they were offering in the public schools, he might get a scholarship somewhere. Whatever it was, you went to your committee man and you would get it. It was social welfare before a social welfare system in this country. McClure, through his minions, dispensed all that. But on the other hand, you better, not only you, but everybody who's voting age in your family, better be registered Republican and better get out to vote, because they knew who voted. So
we have a senior citizen center that, through your research, it was actually used as a patronage gift.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. McClure just, he perfected this kind of system.
Democrats do the same thing. You wouldn't dispute that.
Absolutely not. I wouldn't dispute that for a second. One party rule will eventually evolve into this kind of machine politics, which at its heart is not democratic, and it's not moral, it's immoral, it's power for power's sake.
Tell us about more of the election season and how he ran campaigns for himself or his party.
Election day, people were very busy. They would make sure that everybody could get to the polls. If you needed a ride, they come out and get you. Now they would use police to do this. They would use just the plain old party workers. They would go to the houses. Oftentimes in Chester, it would be a policeman that would show up at your door in uniform. Did you vote yet? Have you cast your vote? How about your husband? How about your son, the one who's old enough to vote? Did he vote yet? So there was a certain amount of intimidation there.
Sure, let's make this point. If you have the entire courthouse working for you, you would have county employees participating on your own election team.
Exactly what the people in Harrisburg got in trouble for not too many years ago.
Sure.
This was standard procedure. It was efficiency. And efficiency for him was not democracy. Perhaps the best way to rule a county is to make it look like it's democratic so that people remain happy. But as I say in the book, I never thought that the majority of people in this county really gave a whit about democracy. The snow was plowed, the buses ran on time, the trash was picked up, the Little Leagues ran on time, the schools were okay, people had parks. Life was pretty good. And that's what people were concerned about.
So have you seen John McClure's signature past his life on the Delco Republican machine?
To an extent, I have. When he passed, actually, the War Board became what he always claimed it had been. You know, a much more democratic organization. But with that democratization of the machine came a little bit of falling apart as people started bickering with each other.
How do you think the Delaware County Republicans stayed in power even after losing a majority here of registration voters?
Well, I think that the legacy of McClure and what people who came after him understood about how he ran the county lasted for a long time. I think voters, to a certain extent, you know, they're Republican, they're going to stay Republican unless there's a real good reason for them to change their registration. And there hasn't been for many years a real good reason for them to change their registration. And my contention is that until the Democrats can get at least one seat on the county bench, that they're really not going to be in a position to think that they've broken the back of the Republican organization in the county.
Describe where your research took you.
Well, I started local with the Historical Society in Delaware County, and they have on microfilm, they have the Chester Times, and I spent months going through those newspapers just looking for anything. I went down to the Hagley Museum, where there's certain collections of papers, mostly the Pew Sun Oil papers. I went to University of Maryland, which had the papers of the union that was involved with the unionization of the Sun Shipyard, and that was a big issue between McClure and Joe Pew. I went to the University of Pennsylvania. I went to the Historical Society of Pennsylvania in town. Excuse me, I went up to Harvard. Now I can't remember the name of the library at Harvard. Looking, I was 1,000 places.
John, let's leave it there. And I want to thank you for being a guest on Delaware County Political News.
Nice to be here.
I hope you liked this episode. If you did, share it so others can learn too. Like it so I know you've enjoyed it, and leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to Delaware County Political News so you get all the great videos right in your mailbox. Signing off. Tune in next time. Bye for now.